Please subscribe, everyone. I would love to reach 50,000 subscribers by sometime in the summer, hopefully by the solstice. Thank you. So, I posted a video a few hours ago, but immediately after doing so, I remembered something important that I wanted to say, but neglected to say it. And so that's the purpose of this video. But before I get to that, I also have to say that it's truly remarkable, the GOP Trump administration period we're in, because with the orange degenerate as the leader, it's just a persistent tornado of insanity, so that hour to hour you can miss something important that's happening. And so as I was putting my video together, he was doing his meeting with Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada. And I noticed a few important things related to that are important, meaning you can see that this guy, because of his Saturn decision that he made in early April, late March, early April, Saturn is squaring, although you could say the decision was Jupiter giving him the excess confidence to pull a stunt like that off. But the Saturn is the one that I am nearly sure this guy is probably awake at night wondering why he would do something that moronic, because of how difficult it is to backtrack now, because it's just not his MO. He doesn't like to backtrack on anything. Although I will admit that he, despite what some people think that he is as intelligent as he says he is, I don't see him that way at all. I think he's quite short in that department, and so I also would not be surprised if he still genuinely believes that he holds all the cards and that people are going to be lining up to offer him deals and all the rest of it, and notice that there are no deals. And when he's asked about it, he gets irritated and he says, yes, there are deals, no, there are no deals, we don't need to make any deals. Translation, it's not going very well. And then you start hearing things like, for instance, Japan, issuing veiled threats around the treasuries they're holding, which if they start selling off can trigger a run on the dollar. In other words, this country is not in a great position to be doing something like this, to be engaging in a trade war on this scale. Same with China. China also holds a lot of our debt or treasuries, so they could also cause a major problem. Now, it's true that because of the global nature of the world in the current era, any move by those countries in that direction would also harm them, because everything is interlinked. But nevertheless, Trump has actually some pretty poor cards, and so he has to make up stories, aka the man is just a constant liar. It just never ends. It's like a fire hose of inventions, lies, deceptions, disinformation all over the place, which, by the way, if you are asking where is it in the chart, well, it's the totality of the chart, but most specifically I would point to, it's a Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is in the 12th house, square Neptune in the 3rd. The 3rd is where you message. Mercury is a messaging planet. Mercury square Neptune is on the downside. On the high end, Mercury square Neptune could make for a great spiritual connection, a great meditator. On the downside is basically a liar, a deceiver. That's what this guy does. That's how it's reflected. The other thing is, I've said, I remember years ago pointing out that Mercury square Neptune is literally on the downside the definition of dumb. A person who so lives in their own reality, they can't see the forest for the trees, and therefore they make grave errors, right? But so I was watching this guy, and I noticed how weak his position is becoming. And now turning to what I failed to mention, I said one thing, there is a key factor, but again, before I get to that, there is this question that people bring up about his health, because I've mentioned that March, April were quite threatening from the position of Saturn, and they're wondering, well, he's still there, so what's going on? This is not going away, in that Saturn returns to those degrees with full force later this year, from the fall into the following spring, and Neptune is in a very similar place, because Neptune is deeper in Pisces during that period, but it's doing an inconjunct 150 to the ascendant, which is another health angle, so that doubles down on the pressure from the 8th house. And Uranus is roaming around the top of the chart, the zenith part of the chart, squaring his Mars and squaring his ascendant. And Uranus and Saturn are implicated in the 7th sign of the chart, Aquarius. And the 7th sign, the 7th and the 8th, this is where you can literally keel over, in terms of a terminal problem. That's where the sun sets, the 8th most specifically, but the 7th as well. And when you add that to the fact that Saturn at birth in his chart is in the 12th, the hospital house, you start to realize, okay, this could be quite a problem. And of course, you add his age, all of these patterns become more and more threatening when a person is at the actuarial age. In fact, Saturn itself is Chronos. It's a planet that rules time. It's considerably more challenging the older you are. And then, of course, you look for the signals and so forth. And Uranus, as an example, tends to link to neurological issues. Saturn is just a broad player. I mean, you could find any kind of thing. He's Leo rising, could be a cardiac thing. Main point is there's lots of exposure there that takes him at least into this deep spring of 26, but then beyond that, Saturn continues its journey into Aries, and Aries, from there, it squares the Cancer planets, those 12th sign planets, and so once it reaches the 9th degree, it squares Mercury. And so the pressure continues, because 12th is a house you always implicate in health. Saturn itself is implicated in health by virtue of living in that house at birth. And Saturn doesn't get out of Aries until 2028. It's that simple. It continues to exert pressure after it finishes with the 3 cardinal planets, Mercury, Eris, and Neptune. Then it moves forward, starts to find midpoints to the next planets that are there, Venus and Saturn, which it eventually reaches in 27. I mean, it's a constant thing, and it's very risky. And so everything that I'm saying about political outcomes, this might happen in such and such a time, yes, provided he can get there. In other words, provided something doesn't happen to in some way disable him or worse, right? And now, returning though to the assumption, let's say that somehow he's able to trudge on forward, get through, and we're just reading it now from the perspective of what happens to his planets then. Well, in that case, a couple of things. One is that in the previous video, I talked about transits. That's where the planets are in the sky relative to where they were. That's the top level in astrology. You see where they are today, what are they doing to their original positions. And so all of this, Saturn is in the 8th house, whatever, that's that, transits. But in progressions, you're looking at the days after birth, and progressions are remarkably reflective as well. For example, he won his first term with the progressed sun right on his ascendant, which, by the way, was also the case for Carney when he just was elected in Canada. It's a very powerful point in the progressed cycle, which happened for him for Trump at age 70, basically. But then, you see, you look at his Jupiter. Now, I mentioned in the previous video, Jupiter is stationary, 17 degrees, trining the sun, sextiling the moon, excellent planet that way. But then you look at what it's doing in progression, and what it did in progression is it moved forward from 17 degrees, but a planet like Jupiter, day to day, is going to move only a little bit, you know. And so it takes many days to get from 17 to start to lock into where his moon and sun are more precisely. Well, isn't it amazing that what happened is that when it got to the 23-degree region, that's trining his sun. And that's what brought him into great prominence. That was concurrent with the first term and still the second term, because it's quite slow, except that by the second term now, meaning 2024, 2025, the Jupiter now has moved further in degrees, and now it's still in Libra, of course, but it's squaring his original natal Venus. And curiously, the natal Venus itself has also progressed from that original start point, and it's together with the Jupiter. Both of them are squaring the natal Venus. That, to me, signals a huge problem, because now you've got a square pattern to Venus, which Venus is the ruler of his 10th, which is his career, his reputation. In other words, that Jupiter is playing against him as time is passing. And what I notice is that the precise square of Jupiter especially doesn't happen until 27 or so. And so it's building in that direction. So that adds to the expectation that this is not going to work out well. And I would add, furthermore, now returning to transits, if you go all the way to 2028, by 2028 in the spring, Saturn enters Taurus. Taurus is his 10th. Now, you see this a lot with people that mismanage their career path, or sometimes they're just unfortunate. For example, that's what happened to Al Gore in the year 2000. Saturn was highly elevated up in the 10th, did not work out, right? And yet, it worked out for George W. Bush. He had the same pattern. So Saturn there can be a pinnacle, but whoever succeeds there, things have to come together in some kind of positive way. For Al Gore, they did not. For Kamala Harris, they did not, because Saturn, that's exactly where it was, elevated at the top. Or Kevin McCarthy, another person that on the top of the chart, his Congress career effectively ended. Well, now Saturn is headed to that 10th sign in 2028. My sense is that that's going to seal it for him, and not in a positive way. In other words, it represents the karma finally, coming to meet him, so to speak. And part of this is that in the Saturn cycle, if you go back to the bottom part of that cycle, it's approximately when he was getting into politics toward becoming a president. If it's down in Scorpio, which is the opposite of Taurus, that was back in the mid-Romney days when he was already involved in the politicking, but then it moved a little forward into Sagittarius by the time he wins his first term, and it's been making its way up, and it's going to reach the pinnacle in 2028. I'd say that's a definite thumbs down on the whole project, even if it doesn't matter in the sense that, they talk about him running again. To me, this is complete lunacy. It's just more of the garbage that he puts out, disinformation. That's not the factor. The factor is what it's going to do to Trumpism, but that's where there may be no way to avoid this other than to live through it, and the country will have to recover from the damage that this, individual is causing. And so in the meantime, we have to be patient and continue to track what he's doing. But bottom line in all this, I am very much encouraged by what I'm seeing in the astrological cycles, because it's vibrating approximately how I thought it would, and it's not to his benefit. Bottom line, plain and simple.